My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am 73 years old. And on Thanksgiving morning, I sat at my own dining room table, the one James and I bought at an estate sale in 1987, wearing a cardigan I'd had since before my son learned to ride a bicycle, watching steam rise from a cup of tea that had gone cold while I wasn't paying attention. My daughter-in-law Natalie walked through the front door carrying a Whole Foods bag in each hand, wearing a wool coat that cost more than my monthly electric bill. She kissed my cheek without touching it and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Eleanor, you look so rested. The country air really does agree with you, doesn't it?" And then my son Nathan, my only child, 46 years old, successful enough to make the Regional Business Journal twice, came through that same door and sat across from me and said, "Mom, has the $5,500 Natalie sends you every month finally let you live comfortably?" I folded my hands around the cold teacup. I looked at my son's face, James's forehead, James's jaw, and I said very quietly, "Nathan, I think it's time we talked." What I showed him after dinner changed everything in that house. I taught 4th grade for 31 years at Millbrook Elementary in Hadley, Virginia. Room 14, second hallway on the left, the room with the leaky radiator that maintenance never fixed and the window that looked out over the old oak tree the children named Gerald. I knew every student's handwriting by October. I knew which ones needed a snack before math and which ones needed 5 quiet minutes before they could speak about anything hard. James used to say I could read a room the way a sailor reads weather. He wasn't wrong. James Whitfield was a civil contractor. He built roads and retaining walls and drainage systems for Caldwell County for 28 years. He was the kind of man who fixed things without being asked, who remembered the names of every person he'd ever hired, who cried exactly twice in our marriage. Once when Nathan was born and once when his own father died, and who spent 40 years making sure I never had reason to cry alone. He passed 4 years ago. A stroke, quick and unfair, the way strokes always are. 3 days in the hospital and then just the absence of him. The permanent, rearranging silence of a house built for 2. Nathan flew in from Charlotte. He sat with me through the arrangements, through the reception, through the first horrible quiet Sunday morning after. He held my hand and said, "Mom, I'm going to take care of you." I believed him. He meant it then. I still believe he meant it then. It was Natalie who turned caring into something else entirely. She came into their marriage 3 years ago, after Nathan's first marriage ended. No children, no lasting bitterness, just 2 people who'd grown in different directions. Natalie Hargrove Whitfield was 41, ran a boutique interior design firm in Charlotte called Hargrove & Associates, was polished in the way people are polished when they've worked very hard at it. She was warm to me at the wedding. She called me Eleanor, not Mom, which I respected. She asked about James. She said all the right things. The first time she suggested managing my finances, I thought she was being kind. Nathan had proposed it gently over the phone, 6 months after the wedding. "Natalie's really good with numbers, Mom. She set up the account. She'll handle the transfers. You don't have to think about it." He was busy. His firm had just taken on a development project in 3 counties. He trusted his wife. I understood that. I was a woman who had trusted my husband, too. So I said yes. I filled out the form she emailed me. I signed where she indicated. And the arrangement began. $5,500 a month, wired on the 1st, for Eleanor's care and comfort, as Nathan described it. For 8 months, I received cash. Never the same amount twice. Sometimes $800 in an envelope Natalie brought when she visited. Always on a Tuesday, always for less than 30 minutes, always with some store-bought food and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Sometimes $500 in an app transfer. Once, just $300 in a note that said, "Costs were high this month. More next time." I am a retired schoolteacher, not a retired accountant. But I taught fractions for 3 decades. I know when numbers don't add up. I started keeping a notebook in April. The first thing I noticed was the visits. Natalie came every 3 to 4 weeks with the reliability of a billing cycle. She would stay 20 to 30 minutes. She always brought something. Flowers once, wine, I don't drink twice, groceries that seemed chosen for appearance rather than anything I actually ate. She always took photos of me holding whatever she'd brought. She always mentioned how well I looked. She always left before I could ask questions that required sitting down to answer. The second thing I noticed was my mail. I'd been receiving bank statements since 1974, paper copies, because I do not trust what I cannot hold in my hands. In May, they stopped arriving. I called the bank. They said I'd switched to paperless. I had not switched to paperless. The third thing was a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I have a landline. James installed it, and I keep it because I am 73 and I am allowed to keep my landline. And in June, I picked it up to call my friend Doris and heard Natalie's voice already on the line, mid-sentence, speaking to someone. She was saying, "She won't push back. She never pushes back. Just make sure the deposit clears by the 5th. I set the phone down as quietly as I knew how. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after that. The same table where James had spread county maps and project drawings for 28 years, where Nathan had done his homework every night from 2nd grade through senior year, where I had graded papers until midnight more times than I could count. I opened my notebook to a fresh page and wrote the date at the top. And then I wrote, "Something is wrong. Find out what." I spent 31 years teaching children to break big problems into smaller ones. I applied the same principle now. What did I know? What did I need to find out? What could I prove? I started making calls. My neighbor Harriet Osman is 78 and was a paralegal for a family law firm in Roanoke for 22 years before she retired. She is the kind of woman who subscribes to 3 newspapers and has opinions about all of them. I walked to her house on a Thursday morning in July with my notebook under my arm and a question I needed answered carefully. "Harriet," I said, "if someone set up a bank account in my name and I signed something I didn't fully understand, could they direct money that belongs to me somewhere else without me knowing?" She looked at me over her reading glasses for a long moment. Then she said, "Sit down, Eleanor. Tell me everything." I told her everything. By the end of the afternoon, I had a list. I needed to see the actual account number the transfers were going to. I needed to see what I'd signed in those forms Natalie emailed. I needed my actual bank statements in my hand, not in an app I didn't set up and couldn't fully access. And I needed to know what name was on that account. The next morning, I drove to First Community Bank on Millbrook Road and asked to speak with the branch manager. His name was Robert Calloway. I have known Robert since he was a teller, and I tutored his daughter through long division. He sat across from me, and I explained that I believed an account had been set up in my name or associated with my name without my full understanding, and I needed to see everything attached to my Social Security number. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned his computer screen where I could see it. There were 2 accounts. One was mine, checking, had been mine since 1989. The deposits going in were modest. My retirement pension, my Social Security, occasional small transfers. The second account was newer, 18 months old. The name on it was Eleanor Whitfield Care Fund, LLC. I had never heard of Eleanor Whitfield Care Fund, LLC. I asked Robert to print everything. He did, without asking why. Good man. I drove home, spread the papers on James's table, and called Harriet. The LLC had been registered in Virginia 8 months ago. Harriet found it in 20 minutes on the state corporation database. Registered agent, Natalie Hargrove Whitfield. Business address, the design firm in Charlotte. The account received Nathan's $5,500 every month. The account disbursed to me anywhere from $400 to $900, varying, irregular, always in cash or small transfers. The remainder, the difference between $5,500 and whatever scraps reached me, stayed in the LLC. Over 16 months, Nathan had wired $88,000 for his mother's care and comfort. I had received roughly $11,000 of it. The remaining $77,000 had passed through Eleanor Whitfield Care Fund, LLC, and, according to the business filings Harriet helped me trace, been transferred in chunks to Hargrove and Associates, to Natalie's design firm, which was, according to 2 of Harriet's former colleagues who still knew people at the county courthouse, significantly in debt. I sat with that number for a while. $77,000. That's 4 years of James's pension. That's the college fund we didn't need because Nathan won a scholarship, but would have been there if he hadn't. That's the kitchen renovation James and I kept saying we'd do someday and never got to. I didn't cry. I thought about crying. But I had been a school teacher for 31 years, and I had learned long ago that when you cry in the middle of a problem, the problem doesn't pause to wait for you. So I made tea, and I got out a fresh manila folder, and I labeled it with a black marker. I went to work. Harriet connected me with her former colleague, a woman named Patricia Lund, who was now a practicing attorney in Roanoke, specializing in elder law and financial exploitation. I met with Patricia on a Wednesday in October. I brought the folder. I laid everything on her conference table: the bank statements, the LLC registration, the transfer records, the notes from my own notebook, dated and signed, the way I used to date and sign permission slips so there was never any confusion. Patricia was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "Mrs. Whitfield, this is textbook elder financial exploitation. The LLC structure was specifically designed to obscure the flow of funds. You have standing to pursue both civil recovery and, depending on what the forensic accounting shows, criminal charges." I asked her what I needed to do. She told me. We made a plan. I want to be very clear about something. I am not a vindictive woman. I taught fourth grade for 31 years. I have broken up 47 years worth of arguments between children who were certain they were right and sat with every single one of them until they could see the other side. Vindictiveness is not something I have time for. But justice and vindictiveness are not the same thing, and I have never confused them. What I wanted was simple. I wanted Nathan to know the truth. I wanted the money accounted for. And I wanted it to stop. I decided that Thanksgiving was the right moment, because Nathan was coming, and Natalie was coming with him. I cooked everything myself: roast turkey, cornbread dressing, green beans from my garden that I'd put up in jars in August, sweet potato casserole with the pecans on top the way Nathan has liked it since he was 9. I set the table with the good china. Mine, purchased by James and me at an auction in 1993, not a wedding gift from anyone. Mine. I put James's photo on the sideboard the way I do every holiday, because he belongs at the table even when he can't sit at it. Natalie arrived first. She hugged me, complimented the smell of the turkey, set a bottle of wine on the counter. She was wearing a cashmere turtleneck and new boots and the particular expression of someone who has no reason to be nervous. Nathan came in behind her and swept me into a hug that lasted long enough that I felt him exhale. My boy. He works too hard and worries too much and has his father's shoulders, and I love him more than he will ever fully understand. We sat down to dinner. I let them eat. I am not a woman who creates scenes, and I had no interest in ruining anyone's appetite. We talked about Nathan's projects, about the weather, about my neighbor, Gerald's new dog. Natalie told a long story about a client in Charlotte that I listened to attentively. After the pie, after the coffee, Nathan leaned back in his chair, James's chair, the one at the head of the table, and looked at me with the particular tenderness of a son who believes he has done right by his mother. "Mom," he said, "has the $5,500 Natalie sends you every month finally let you live comfortably?" The table was quiet. Natalie refilled her wine. I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and stood up. "I think," I said, "it might be time to look at some paperwork." I went to the sideboard and picked up the manila folder I had placed there that morning behind James's photograph. I carried it to the table and set it down in the center, on top of the good china, on top of the linen tablecloth we'd used since 1991. I opened it the way I always opened my grade book, methodically, one page at a time. I showed Nathan the 2 accounts. His transfers going into Eleanor Whitfield Care Fund, LLC, a business he had never heard of and had never agreed to fund. I showed him the LLC registration with Natalie's name on it. I showed him the transfer records, the disbursements, the gap between $88,000 sent and $11,000 received. I showed him the filings linking the LLC to Hargrove and Associates. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I presented findings the way I had always asked my students to present their work. Clearly, in order, with evidence to support every statement. Nathan's face went through something I will not try to fully describe. He is an engineer by training and disposition, and I watched him do what engineers do when confronted with data that contradicts their assumptions. He checked it again, and then he looked at his wife. Natalie began with denial. The account was for administrative purposes. There were management fees. I didn't understand financial structures. She said it calmly, reasonably, the voice of someone who had practiced. Nathan asked one question. "What's the address on the LLC?" She didn't answer. "Natalie, what's the business address?" "Nathan, it's Thanksgiving. We don't need to. Is it your firm?" The question sat on the table between them like a stone. She said it was complicated. Nathan picked up his phone. He called his attorney, a man named David Park, who I had met once at their wedding and who answered on the second ring even on Thanksgiving. I heard Nathan's voice, low and clear, asking about emergency freezes on wire transfers, about forensic accounting timelines, about his obligations given potential fraud committed by a spouse. Natalie started crying. Real tears, the kind that come when there's nothing left to try. She said the business had been struggling. She hadn't known how else to manage it. She had intended to pay it back. She loved Nathan. She loved me. I looked at her. I thought about 31 years of fourth graders who had sat across from me with tears on their cheeks, trying to explain why something that was wrong had somehow made sense to them. I had always listened carefully. I had always been kind. And I had always, without exception, required accountability. I said, "Natalie, I believe you were afraid. Fear makes people do things they know are wrong. But $77,000 is not a misunderstanding." She looked at me. I don't think anyone had spoken to her that way in a very long time. Nathan ended the call. He sat for a moment with his hands flat on the table. Then he looked at his wife and said, very quietly, "I think you should go to a hotel tonight. David is going to need to talk to us separately." She left. The house went quiet. The furnace ran. Outside, Harriet's porch light was on across the street, and I knew she was awake, waiting. Nathan sat across from me in James's chair for a long time. He said he was sorry in every way a person can say it, with words and silence and the particular posture of someone who has realized they failed to pay enough attention. I poured us both more coffee. I told him what his father used to say when a project went wrong. The mistake isn't the end of the job. It's just where the real work starts. Patricia Lund filed the civil suit in January. The state attorney's office opened a separate investigation in February based on the LLC documentation and the forged signatures on the account setup forms. Forms that bore something approximating my name, but not my hand, not my particular careful cursive that had written the same signature on 31 years of report cards. Natalie's attorney negotiated. The court decided. She entered a repayment agreement and a guilty plea on one count of financial exploitation of an elderly person, which carries consequences in Virginia that I will leave to the record to describe. Paige Calloway, Natalie's business partner at Hargrove and Associates, who had knowingly accepted the transferred funds as operating revenue, provided a statement to investigators and faced separate civil liability. She said she thought it was family money that wasn't being used. I have taught enough children to know when someone has confused available with unclaimed. Nathan repaid the full $88,000 into my verified account, my name, my bank, my routing number, confirmed by me in person with Robert Calloway at First Community Bank. I kept what I needed and donated $25,000 to the Hadley County Senior Services Fund, earmarked for financial counseling for elderly widows and widowers in our county, because nobody told me this could happen to me, and I would like someone to tell the next woman before it does. The folder is in the top drawer of James's desk now. I don't expect to need it again, but I keep it because I am a woman who keeps things that matter. Nathan visits every other weekend now. He drives up from Charlotte on Saturday mornings. He fixes things around the house the way his father used to, in the unhurried, competent way of a man who learned from watching someone who cared about doing it right. Last month, he sat at the kitchen table while I made soup, and he said, "Mom, I don't know how you stayed so calm through all of it." I thought about that for a moment. I thought about 31 years of room, 14, of Gerald the oak tree outside the window, of children who needed someone to stay calm so they could learn how to be. I said, "Nathan, calm isn't the absence of feeling. It's the decision to let the facts do the talking." He was quiet. Then he nodded, the way he used to nod when he finally understood a problem. James's photo watches from the sideboard. That patient, proud expression. I know what he would say. He would say, "You built something that held." And I would say, "We built it together, James. You and me and 31 years and a boy who came home." The soup is warm. The house is warm. The folder is in the drawer where it belongs. Quiet people don't beg. They document. If this story reminded you to check on someone you love, not just send money, but truly check, share it. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do. Every story here ends the same way, with the truth.